Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
Welcome to another Voternomics, where politics and markets collide. This year, voters around the world have the ability to turn markets, countries and economies like never before. So we've created this series to help you make sense of it all. I'm Stephanie Flanders.
I'm Adrian Wooldridge.
And I'm Allegra Stratton.
And on this episode, we thought we would take a closer look at the rise of right-wing populism in Europe. And we have obviously had our own variety of that on show at the start of this week with the release of the Reform Party's contract, not manifesto, with the UK. But Nigel Farage has spoken about wanting to be Prime Minister after the next election. Giorgia Meloni is already Prime Minister of Italy, and she was on show this weekend hosting her counterparts at the G7 summit in Puglia, and it was pretty evident that she was the only leader with a spring in her step and a favourable poll rating. So we wanted to hear about the secrets of her success and the lessons for mainstream and maybe also less mainstream Conservative parties in the UK from one of her fans, Francesco Giubilei, the president of the leading Italian Conservative foundation Fondazione Tatarella. He's also the author of The History of European Conservative Thought. And then we're going to hear a completely different perspective from Yanis Varoufakis, who, of course, you will know as the former finance minister of Greece, motorbike owner and author of several international best-selling books, including recently Techno-Feudalism, What Killed Capitalism. So, Adrian, Allegra, it does feel like a week to be thinking about the rise of the right in Europe. We can see also in this snap election that Macron's called in France, obviously a big focus on Marine Le Pen's Rassemblement National party, formerly the National Front. I want to understand it, but I also want to think about lessons, as I said, for everybody in the UK.
Yeah, one of the striking things about the right is that these are nationalist movements, and the things that they hate most of all are the sort of the global Davos elites. And yet, in some ways, they are in themselves international. They learn from each other, they imitate each other. And I was just thinking of Farage, who has launched his contract this morning, contract with you, and that's directly taken from Newt Gingrich. You know, we don't have that in British politics. We have manifestos. You know, Peel launched the whole thing with the Tamworth Manifesto. Now we have somebody using the language of a contractarian society like the United States, and his own political party isn't really a political party. It's a private company which treats him as a star, not as a party leader, but as a star with lots and lots of followers, which is exactly the politics that you see with Trump, but also with a lot of European populist leaders. So it's a strange mixture of nationalism and internationalism that we're seeing.
But Adrian, he's leading a revolt. He's not, he's making a play of that, isn't he? He's not a manifesto, because that would be too vanilla, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I suppose so. But they're all in some sense leading revolts. But in a lot of Europe now, they're moving from being a party of revolt to being a party of government. And you see that with the French in particular.
And this is what I think is interesting, because although they are all consider themselves to be in the same family to some extent, although actually recently none of them have got on very well with the Alternative for Deutschland party. It's considered to be beyond the pale, even in far-right circles. But I think Giorgia Meloni's leadership, her time in government, has been very interesting in the way that she's been willing to compromise, willing to have very mainstream views and policies on Ukraine, on quite a lot of economic things. And I thought it was very striking, these statements that nobody really cares about except the people drafting them. But they have these communiques from the G7, and the only disagreement of all the things they'd agreed on this very important package for Ukraine and other things was around the restatement of support for reproductive rights and safe and legal abortion from last year's communique. And I thought it was interesting that the one thing she was actually sort of playing ball and, to all intents and purposes, being a mainstream leader when it came to many of these important European issues. But on that core cultural ground, she still had to mark out a more traditional, a more sort of, in some ways, it was more to her base.
Absolutely. Well, we tend to talk about the far right and the right, but there are very important internal divisions. There's a division between the pro-Putin people and the anti-Putin people, and there's a division over sort of responsible economic policy as well. And I think probably some fundamental cultural divisions. If you look at the far right in the Netherlands, for example, it's very pro-gay rights because its basic critique is of Islam.
The opposite of Meloni. Yeah. I mean, they would not agree on that.
But in some ways, this is a topsy-turvy conversation because actually, if you look at Meloni and her international allies, you would say Rishi Sunak, is her intellectual bedfellow because...
And they do seem to get on quite well.
And her Albania plan, which it looks like some European politicians are falling behind, which is, the idea of having the immigrants processed offshore is partly inspired by Rwanda. So there's a kind of topsy-turviness because, her mate, Rishi Sunak, who is doing so badly in the opinion polls, potentially is leaving government. But actually, some of the ideas he's espoused in government are those in the ascendant.
Well, I think that shows again, it's immigration as this absolutely core driving force for some of this. But there has been a question about whether Keir Starmer will have anyone to talk to at these summits. He will be the exception if we see all of these sort of mainstream centrist and centre-right leaders go in the next few years.
That's the other topsy-turviness, that Britain is completely out of sync with Europe and may well be out of sync with the United States as well. We may be the one surviving area for liberal democracy.
But if you look at what Keir Starmer's foreign affairs spokesperson David Lammy is saying, regarding Trump, and others, they are cognizant that they are going to have to work with everyone.
Yes, Lammy has somewhat changed his tune on Trump, I think.
Well, I have a feeling, partly from looking at our outlines for future weeks, I think we'll be getting on to that topic in coming days. So we should move to our conversation with Francesco Giubilei, the president of the Italian conservative foundation Fondazione Tatarella. Francesco, thank you so much for joining us. We are fascinated looking at Giorgia Meloni at the recent G7 summit and obviously in previous months, really comfortable in her position as Prime Minister of Italy and successful both domestically and, it seems, at these international summits. So I guess the obvious question is, what's the secret of her success?
I think that Giorgia Meloni is becoming year by year an important leader, not only for Italy, not only for our country, and not only for the Italian conservative right, but also for the European landscape, especially after the result of the European elections, because we saw that the result of the president of France, Emmanuel Macron, was not a good result. In fact, the result of Rassemblement National and Marine Le Pen was quite good. And the same is for Olaf Scholz, the leader of Germany. And in the case of Italy, Giorgia Meloni had a really important result, not only as the leader of Fratelli d'Italia, the main Italian center-right party, but also for all the Italian government. And after that, we are entering in a new phase for the European Union. Right now, there are some important discussion for the president of the European Commission, and Giorgia Meloni can play an important role as Prime Minister of Italy, but also as president of the ECR and the leader of the main Italian party.
I guess one thing we should sort of understand is whether we're even describing her in the right way. We talk about far right, and when she came to power, we were very focused on her origins. But I wonder whether she represents something different that's not a traditional kind of conservatism or certainly traditional far right.
Yeah, that is quite an important point. Usually when someone, especially abroad, but not only abroad, sometimes also in our country, want to describe or sometimes attack Giorgia Meloni, or in general some politicians that are part of the Italian right, they describe them as a neo-fascist or some people that are linked with some fascist idea. And I think this is not correct correct, and this is not the correct way to try to understand what is happening in our country. The truth is that the right that is represented by Giorgia Meloni is a conservative right. When I use the word conservative, it's quite important to make a distinction between the Latin conservatism and the Italian conservatism and the American and English conservatism, because there are some important difference. For example, on the economic issues, our conservatism is more focused on welfare state, for example, and the British and the American conservatism is more focused, for example, on some classical liberal ideas. So there are some difference, of course, but in general, the correct way to try to understand why Giorgia Meloni is becoming so important and so voted in our country is because she's trying also to talk with the lower class that in the past voted for the left, but right now, if we saw also the result in the main city, for example, in the city center of Roma or Milano, the people vote for the left. If we go to, for example, some difficult areas of Roma, we see that in this part of the city, the people decide to vote for Giorgia Meloni, and this is quite interesting. So I think that is important to try to analyze in a deeper way what is the success of Giorgia Meloni.
I don't know how much you're following British politics, but who would you put Giorgia Meloni closer to? Rishi Sunak, who is obviously a friend of hers, or Nigel Farage, who leads the Reform Party?
I think definitely that she's closer to the Conservative Party, the Tories, and to Sunak than to Farage. There are many points in common between Meloni and Sunak, or in general Meloni and the Conservative Party, but how I said to you before, there are also some difference, because of course to be a conservative in Italy is different than being a conservative in the UK, because our conservatism is quite linked, for example, with the Catholic traditions. So when we talk about ethic themes, for example, our conservatism is quite close with the vision of the Catholic Church, and this is a big difference with the Tories. But in the same time, when we talk about Farage, I think in Italy we use a word, there is not a translation in English, the word is sovranismo, is meaning probably national populism or something like that. And when we talk about Farage, we can talk more than a conservative leader, we can talk about a national populist leader. So I think that Meloni is definitely closer to the Conservative Party.
You talked about her ability to reach beyond the sort of metropolitan elites who live in the middle of Rome to ordinary people. How can she do that? What are the things that bind the Conservative leadership to the working class voter?
In the bigger city or in the city center of the bigger city, the people vote for the left or the center left. When we go to the neighborhoods that are more close to some problems, for example, with the security, with the migration, the people decide to vote for some conservative party. And the same is, for example, in some smaller city in our country. People decided to prefer and to vote for Giorgia Meloni and to vote for the center-right coalition, because they feel that the answers that Giorgia Meloni give, for example, with the migration problem, for example, on economic issues, for example, on the European Union issues. There is a big debate in our country about the green policy made by the European Union, especially for the decision to stop the engine motors in 2035. And because of that, the people decide to vote for Giorgia Meloni, because also the lower class thinks that the answers that the conservatives and the right gave to their problem right now is closer to them than the left.
So liberalism is becoming an elite project. It's captured by the rich.
I make you an example. I live in Roma. Roma is probably the bigger capital in the European Union or in Europe in general with the worst public transportation, because unfortunately the underground in Rome is not working so well, and every time that they are trying to do some new project, they discover some ancient Roman ruins, so it's quite difficult to build a bigger underground. And in Roma, there is a leftist measure. And the idea of the measure was to create a bigger zone in which the car couldn't enter. And this, of course, creates some problem, not to the rich people which lived in the center of the city, and they can move walking or by taxi or by scooter. But this creates some big problem for the poor people which live in some area not near the city center, and they must take their car to go to work. And of course, they are angry against the measure because of that.
It is interesting. There's a similar kind of issue in the UK around 20 mile per hour limits, which is a popular campaigning force for many in our election.
Francesco, where does this end? Because is that the question? So where does this end in that Giorgia Meloni, it looks like her deficit has gone up to 7.2%. You'll correct me if I'm wrong. So, and you've very lucidly outlined how pro-welfare spending she is, and that's clearly important to her coalition of voters. Can she afford to keep on being ultra-popular?
You mean about economy, or you mean in general?
The economy, yeah. Under the procedures, the fiscal rules for the European Union, they could well have to do, could have to do some very tough things, which in the past have overturned Italian governments on a very regular basis.
This is quite an important point. I mean, our economy is a good economy. We are the third economy of European Union. We have a private income that is quite good. Most of the Italians, they own their house. We have quite a strong bank system. So our economy is a good economy, but our private economy is a good economy. Our problem is the public economy. Mm-hmm. And when we talk about the public economy, we talk about a state which have a really hiked public debt. And the problem of our public debt is that the people, the Italians, and also the politicians think about our public debt as something that is of no one. In reality, the public debt is the debt of everyone. Yes. The big problem of our country compared to the high debt is the lower possibility of growth of our economy. If we do a comparison between a high public debt and the low growth of our economy, this can create some problem. But I have to say, this is not a problem of Meloni. This is the problem of everyone which will...
With respect, though, it's going to be her problem. I mean, will that mark the end of her honeymoon with the voters when she actually has to make the same tough decisions about this, to manage this big stock of debt that every government in Italy has had to deal with for the last 20 or 30 years, and has actually managed to, just about prevent from spiraling out of control, has stepped back from the abyss quite a few times, each time by making very tough decisions that she has so far been quite reluctant to make?
Yes, I think that luckily the toughest decisions were made 10 years ago, especially in 2011 after Monti government. He was a technical government, and he made many tough decisions. So right now, the public debt is really high, but is more or less under control. Of course, the COVID period didn't help us and didn't help everyone. So I think that Meloni, she knows and she understands that she doesn't have the opportunity of doing many economic measures that are really in favor in helping the Italians, for example, on cut the taxation. But if she want, for example, introduce new taxation, this can be something good, for example. And I think that she will manage in it. And the economy is, of course, quite an important issue, but there are other issues that are important for the Italian electorate. For example, the migrant crisis is a topic that is quite important, especially in the south, of Italy, foreign politics. And I think that Meloni is managed quite well on this topic. And of course, she also has to manage in a European Union context where also the economic situation of Germany, that is the main economy of European Union, is becoming worse compared to 2-3 years ago.
Francesco Giubilei, I'll be very interested to see her next few budgets, how she manages to square the circle. But in the meantime, and then we'll have you back. But in the meantime, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
And now, as they say, for something completely different. Yanis Varoufakis, Greece's finance minister for 6 months in 2015, negotiating on behalf of the Greek government during the Greek debt crisis, who has also been Secretary-General of the Democracy in Europe Movement 2025, a left-wing pan-European political party he co-founded in 2016. Yanis Varoufakis, very good to have you physically in the studio. Thanks for joining us on Voternomics.
It's a great pleasure.
We've got lots of things to talk to you about, but we are focusing on this programme on the rise of the populist right in Europe. I guess, one obvious question is, why is right-wing populism so much more successful than left-wing populism at the moment?
Because it's authentic. I don't believe you can be left-wing and a populist. Because my definition of populism, the way I understand populism, is to be all things to all people, make all sorts of promises, and then jump on a soapbox and be jingoistic and call upon people to trust you to make things great again. And ... I won't go on. But that if you do that, then you're not a left-winger, in my view. You're not a humanist. You're not facing the truth. And you usurp the people's vote against the people. So this is a kind of contest I have with other leftists who disagree with me. The two words, left and populism, you put them together, you end up with an incongruity. And so, when the left tries populism, it becomes ridiculous. When the right become populist and become fascist, and they are very successful, as we have seen during the mid-war period.
The left are too honest.
And that, of course, is the end of the left. When you do it in the name of the left.
The left are too honest to be populists.
The left should be honest, and therefore should avoid populism in its pursuit of being popular.
But the populist approach, even by your definition, we have parties that are offering a lot to all people, but particularly working people who feel they've been left out, excluded from the direction that modern economies have gone. If what's being promised by your description is not possible, or not possible without a lot of other difficult sacrifices, does that mean you think these leaders are going to eventually come to grips, have to sort of face reality and come a cropper? Where do you see this going? Because they are doing very well with their brand of populism that we've been hearing.
This is a brilliant question. I think it all depends on how many levers they have access to. So compare and contrast Giorgia Meloni with Viktor Orban. Because Orban is not in the euro, he has more levers to pull. So he trebled the minimum wage. He did what Mussolini did. In other words, he looked after the working class, but it was a Faustian bargain in the sense that I will look after you, you keep your mouth shut. Authoritarianism, you make me great again so that I make Hungary great again. We turn against the foreigners, the Jews, the Muslims, the other, it doesn't matter. So he had more degrees of freedom to do that. Giorgia Meloni doesn't, because she's in the euro, she has an unsustainable public debt, she has a banking system which is rickety, and so she simply follows Mario Draghi's policies, no difference to Mario Draghi, with weaponized misanthropy when it comes to migrants, foreigners, lesbians, gays, woke, and all that. But her days are numbered as a populist, as a right-wing neo-fascist populist, because she doesn't have the levers. She cannot look after the people the way that she's been promising them. If anything, she's doing away, taking away protections that had been there from the previous governments.
Well, her days might be numbered as representing a far-right populist position, but as a different kind of right-wing but sort of normalized leader,
yes.
She could have quite a good future.
Yes, if she becomes a Berlusconi, who is somebody on the center left, who again is misogynist, racist, and so on. So a little bit of Trump, but with Mario Draghi economics, neoliberal economics. My great fear is that we are now seeing in Europe, because of the fragmentation of the European Union, the single market, the politics, this European Union Parliament is going to be completely incapable of effectively exercising any parliamentary process. My fear is that you're going to have a right-wing neo-fascist populist right that manages to ditch austerity, to ditch the neoliberal agenda completely, erect new borders, erect new tariffs, and channel a lot of money into armaments, which may have an economic impact, but the most important impact will be the coalescence with nationalism. And that could be successful. And if that happens, Europe is simply not going to be a place that I will want to live in.
Is a key potential part of this the French election? Because if you look at Marine Le Pen, currently they do have a very odd collection of policies, but very leftist economic policies.
Don't call fascism leftism.
But if you look at her economic policies,
but that's Mussolini was a socialist, and then he became a fascist. And what was the deal? I will protect you. He introduced the first pension system in continental Europe, universal one. He increased wages, and he clamped down on trade unions. He clamped down on democratic processes, and effectively started the process that led to the Second World War, together with his friend Hitler. I call this fascism. This is the definition of fascism.
What do you think about the significance of the French election? I mean, where does Rassemblement National fit into the kind of that darker vision that you just painted?
Well, let me try to lighten up the mood a bit. I hope that Macron's strategy, even though I'm completely opposed to everything he's been doing in the last few years, but I hope his strategy of bringing them into essentially government through cohabitation. He's trying to do what Chirac did with Jospin, what Mitterrand did with Chirac, effectively to defunk them by making them less popular through allowing them to occupy ministries. I hope that works, but I fear it might not. I'm very worried that they may actually succeed because, let's face it, the public finances of France, just like Italy's, and the public finances of Germany, for that matter, are not consistent with the fiscal rules. So something will have to give. Now, if Bardella, together with Le Pen, with the collapse of the Republicans...
Bardella being his the young leader who might be the prime minister.
Who is my nightmare, personally, because under the two Le Pens, at least they were not that palatable to the young. Now, this is a guy who is quite photogenic. He has star quality. He's young. He comes from a working class area. He speaks well. He doesn't look like a fascist, even though he is. That's why he's my nightmare, because he's effective.
You mentioned the young. One of the striking things about right-wing thought or right-wing movements on the continent rather than in Britain is how popular they are with younger people and how they're able to attract quite, as you say, photogenic and dynamic young politicians. Why is that?
Because we, the left, failed. This is the fault of the left. Let's face it, the worst thing that can happen to democracy is to have fascists representing the anti-systemic trend. 2015, we get elected on an anti-austerity program. I personally had proposals for the IMF and the European Central Bank, which I thought were very sensible in terms of debt swaps and nothing very radical, together with an anti-austerity program. And we said that we will be elected and we will not budge. We are not going to take another credit card under conditions that are completely financially unsustainable, and you don't have to be a lefty to agree with that. And we buckled. And then our own government, after I left, I have to say that, but who cares about me? Our own government practiced the worst kind of austerity, the worst kind of overtaxing small business, everyone, right? As if in a part of a plan to make the place unviable. And then there's the domino effect, because the left wing in Spain, Podemos, collapsed as a result of not wanting to be, Syriza number 2, Die Linke in Germany, the French left collapses. And what is left? The populist right, which I call neo-fascists, being the only ones that are out there suggesting something different. I mean, whether you're here in Britain today with Sunak and Starmer, or whether you are looking at the policies of the SPD, Olaf Scholz, and Merz, CDU, the differences between them are tiny. And it's not as if Europe is flourishing. Europe has had a 15-year dearth of investment. That's why we're falling behind the Chinese. We have not invested in modern technologies, any kind of modern technology, for 15, 20 years in Europe. So this discontent, who's going to pick up the votes from that discontent? The only anti-systemic forces. We of the left have gone to ground. We try to bend over backwards to accommodate the neoliberal policies. I remember telling Schäuble once, I said, look, I know you don't like seeing me in front of you because I'm a left-wing.
The German finance minister.
Yeah, because, I'm a lefty. But you know what? We are Europeanists and we are Democrats. And if you squash the living daylights out of our people in order to get rid of us, you are going to end up with fascists on the other side of the table. And I think that was right.
But Keir Starmer is of the left. He's very close.
This
is what I wanted to know. Is he on the left?
Which I find preposterous.
Right, okay.
He's not of the left. That's not a bad thing. I mean, I'm not a totalitarian. I don't believe that everybody should be from the left. But I just don't agree that he's from the left.
Okay, all right, that's clear. Let's look at immigration, where he is trying to forge another path, where he's saying, obviously he's not going to renew freedom of movement and so on, but he is saying that he'll negotiate returns agreements with the continent. What is, we've heard from another guest earlier in the programme, and you've threaded through everything you've said, this kind of immigration seems to be the stimulus for some of the rise of these parties. What would be the other way to deal with the worries about immigration that so many electorates around Europe are clearly feeling?
How about ditching racism light? Because this is what Keir Starmer is doing. I don't know Keir personally. I suspect he and I would agree on immigration being a blessing, not a curse. Europe is getting old. For 1,000 years, we've been populating the rest of the earth. We've been migrating everywhere, sometimes with guns and, white settlers. So suddenly we have a problem with immigration. What has happened is the demographics have changed. We're getting old. People are coming towards us. And that should have been fine if we had a migration policy. Keir Starmer, however, being a relatively spineless politician, is not going to stand up to the Farages and to the Sunaks and to the Bravermans and say, you know what, we need immigration. And we're going to create a policy which is simultaneously financially and economically viable and humane and consistent with international law. He's not saying that. So he's trying to present, just like austerity light.
Play that back, though. I mean, one of the things you just argued was if you don't give a key chunk of the electorate something at the table, if you force austerity down their throats, then you're going to get something worse down the road. I mean, you could make exactly the same argument about keeping immigration off the agenda for many years, a sort of a coalition of the right and left mainstream across Europe, not just the UK. If you don't let people have a view or even discuss the scale, the direction of immigration, you end up with something worse. And if you're a Democrat, you have to accept that there are people who feel, that people don't feel the same way. They see the economic benefit, maybe. They may also see it as an economic cost to them if it pushes down their wages. But they also see a cultural consequence, which many people are uncomfortable with.
There must be a differential economic impact of immigration as well. Doesn't it hit poorer people and benefit in many ways richer people?
Of course, if you practice austerity while letting lots of people in.
But I mean, just in terms
that's
of
why I'm against austerity. But let me answer your question, because I think you're perfectly right. I don't believe in keeping important issues like this off the table. I believe in a vigorous debate.
But to engage in that conversation, you're actually saying is racism light.
No, not at all.
Well, that is what I'm saying. I think that's what the Labour Party would say. They were part of the conversation.
No, I don't think it's engaging with the conversation when they effectively say that we will manage to find a way of limiting immigration which is more efficient than the Tories. If you really want to engage, and here I'm coming to your question too. Look, I remember I was in Doncaster during the Brexit campaign. I was campaigning against Brexit as somebody who is not really enamored of the EU, confusing people. And I remember there was this wonderful older woman who came to me and said, Yanis, she wanted to engage in a discussion about immigration. As you say, she said, I am not a racist, I'm an internationalist, I'm a left-winger, but my building is now full of Romanian boys who live 4 in one room, and they can afford, because they're 4 boys, to bid rents up. And we cannot afford to compete with them. And then I asked her a question. I said, so tell me the story of this building. It used to be a council house. It was sold off to the private sector. So the problem is not the Romanian boys, it's that these council houses were sold. Now they are part of a rent-maximizing rentier frenzy. And council houses have not been built to replace the old stock of council houses. So if you really want, as the Labour Party, as a progressive, to engage with people, you have to take very seriously what this woman said about the fact that now she has a building full of Romanian boys, which she actually liked. So she was not even a racist. To call her a racist is just preposterous. It's totally unacceptable. It's like Hillary Clinton calling Trump's supporters deplorables. No, you have to engage, and you have to explain that, that was a mistake. Now we need to build, council housing. The solution is not to get rid of the Romanians. This is going to make Doncaster even poorer and sadder. That is the kind of debate I would like to see the Labour Party engage in.
But the Labour Party would claim that it is in favour of activist government. It's going to have a national energy company. That it's going to have a national investment scheme. That it's going to be much more...
And have a big expansion in home building.
Indeed.
Yeah, but where's the money coming from?
Do you think that there's nothing
houses
there? Do you think there's nothing there from the Labour Party? That's
lovely intentions. But, I'm an economist, so I read stuff. I have this bad habit. And I read very carefully both the manifesto, the 2024 manifesto, and what the Institute of Fiscal Studies said. And what I see is austerity baked in. I don't see the money coming in anywhere. They're going to have to effect cuts, and they will effect cuts that are brutal in areas that will be very hurtful to the weakest of people.
What should the left be learning from the last few years in Europe, and particularly when you look at, say, for example, the European elections?
My nightmare is that because we have messed up, we the left have messed up, that now the coalescence between the most rabid and austerian and Trumpist aspects or segments of the old Tory party in this country, but also in France, in Germany and so on, will go into bed with the neo-fascists. And we the left are irrelevant, because we've been tried, we've been tested, and we failed our test. And we are ourselves recoiling into identity politics, into fighting one another as to how do you define a woman, which is a very interesting philosophical topic, but the fascists love it when we recoil in that manner into identity politics. That is my nightmare. So the one thing I'm trying to do as a leftist through DiEM25 or Democracy in Europe movement across Europe, we have a small movement, but we're a little bit influential amongst the left, is to ask the big questions again. How do you combine investment with social policies? How do you break down that alliance between austerity and racism and hatred of the other, of the foreigner? What do we do about Europe turning into a war union with the idiotic concept that since the Green Deal failed, we are going now to develop through spending on arms and developing a military-industrial complex in Europe, which we never will. But we need to tackle these things. We need to take a break, be self-critical. And as you said before,
I think you're going to get a break, at least in many parts of Europe.
We are already having a break, but we must not go into self-referential, identity politics, becoming irrelevant with glee.
Yanis Varoufakis, thank you very much.
Well, thank you.
So that was quite a lot of meat there.
Definitely outspoken and some very interesting analysis. Not my politics, but some of the analysis, I think, holds true whatever your politics are.
Well, the idea that the left is going to be almost sort of bringing its hands on the sidelines for quite a long time and somewhat irrelevant, certainly in Europe, Question mark about the UK, because it depends who you consider to be left.
But also, it's complicated. If you think about the last election, 2019 election, where Jeremy Corbyn's manifesto did very well. So actually, lots of this is 2019.
Everything. Well, there was that point about the individual policies in it were individually popular. But labelling it Labour and saying you were going to do it all together was not a credible proposition along with Corbyn. And
that's one of the complexities about, and you heard it a little bit with Francesco around, actually in Italy, her politics is grounded in what appeals to the lower class and so on. I hate the phrase lower class, but he used it, so we have to use it. The less well off. That plus 2019, Corbyn's manifesto doing quite well. And then also a little bit further back than that, but actually some of the Theresa May manifesto was not a million miles away from it either, in terms of, have to reach out and appeal to the people who feel they've been left behind by globalisation.
Well, and that's why I think it's going to be this key question about how do these sort of these outside forces, far right, however you describe them, when they're in government, how do they govern? Do they, as he claims, end up, or at least as he fears, end up going down a profoundly kind of authoritarian, even anti-European Union sort of divisive road? Or, as looks a bit what Giorgia Meloni has been doing, do they more become a different face of the right, saying things that we don't necessarily agree with on cultural issues, but fundamentally not challenging the institutions of Europe?
The fundamental problem is that centrist liberalism has become a philosophy of the elites, of the ruling classes, of people who are doing quite well out of globalization, as quite well out of the status quo. And if that's the case, you find it very, very difficult to win elections, if not impossible. So liberalism, centrist liberalism, which I think everybody in this room would subscribe to, needs to find a way of reconnecting with poorer people. The best way, of course, is to improve the economy, raise productivity, show that you can actually get richer. But I think it also needs to be done on certain cultural issues, on the issue of nationalism versus globalism and things like that. And personally, I believe on terms of taking back control of immigration.
I can't believe I'm trying to find reasons to make Yanis Varoufakis feel less bad. But I think the other thing I think we have learned from recent politics is that things might look, dire for a particular bit of the political spectrum or so on, and they flip very quickly.
Yes.
And it's the volatility and the fact that trends are coming. Everything is shortened and trends come and go so quickly.
It wasn't that long ago to die, and perhaps you were writing articles about why is it that the Conservatives are the most powerful and successful party in human history.
But isn't that the thing? The longer you're in power, the more likely you're going to be
destroyed.
Reach a very sticky conclusion. All right. Well, I feel like we had something of a seminar on European political thought this week. Who knows what we'll do next week? But Allegra and Adrian, thank you very much. Thanks for listening to this week's Voternomics with Bloomberg. This episode was hosted by me, Stephanie Flanders, with Adrian Wooldridge and Allegra Stratton. Produced by Summer Sadi with booking support from Chris Martlew. Additional editing and sound design by Moses Andam. Brendan Francis Noonan is our executive producer. Sage Bowman is head of Bloomberg Podcasts. With special thanks to Francesco Giubilei, Yanis Varoufakis and Chiara Albanese. Do subscribe, rate and review this show, especially if you like it, wherever you listen to podcasts, and tell all your friends.